Welcome back to Goosebump on the Midnight series, where the most terrifying haunted stories are told. Would you dare to enter a place that has been sealed for 40 years? Join us as we explore Whispers from Serenity Hills, a story that will take you to the Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute in Havenwood Peak, a massive collective grave hidden behind a historic facade. Maya, a young female architect, and her colleague, Ben, are assigned the task of surveying the Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute to prepare a plan for its demolition. But from the very beginning, the project is shrouded in strangeness, a state-of-the-art hospital, abandoned overnight due to a serious medical incident. Ignoring nightmarish dreams and ominous feelings, they step into a world where time has stood still. They are unaware that they are trespassing into the domain of trapped children's spirits and a malevolent force born from mad pride. What did they confront inside the hospital? Giggles and the creaking of a wooden horse echoing in the empty hallways. The ghost of a little girl in a white dress with hollow eyes, appearing to plead for their help. And most terrifying of all, the truth about the Morning Light Project, an inhuman experiment by the Institute's director, Professor Alistair Croft, who used a horrific therapy to tether the consciousness of deceased pediatric patients, turning them into souls eternally imprisoned in hell. Just when they accidentally trigger a safety system and think they have escaped, the nightmare truly begins. Professor Croft, now a powerful, vengeful spirit, was not completely destroyed. A fragment of his evil soul managed to cling to a patient's medical ledger, following Maya back to the city and beginning a horrifying process of possession. The fight is no longer for survival, but for the salvation of a soul. Maya and Ben must return to Havenwood Peak, seeking help from a mountain recluse to perform a final exorcism, a battle that takes place within Maya's own mind. Can love and willpower triumph over a demon that has existed for nearly half a century? Or will Maya become the new host, allowing Professor Croft's evil to be reborn? Follow the story to the very end to find the answer. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next thrilling horror story. The contract lay on Maya's desk, as cold and final as a death certificate. The words Site Survey and Demolition Plan for Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute were printed in bold, stark against the white paper. Around her, the New Era architectural firm was as bustling as any other Friday afternoon. The clatter of keyboards, the rustle of paper, the sound of Ben, her colleague, loudly complaining about the concrete quality of some project. But Maya's mind had drifted to another place, a place shrouded in the mist and silence of the highlands. Havenwood Peak. The Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute. The two names sounded like a whisper from the past. What's got you so lost in thought? Ben pulled a chair over, setting a cup of coffee on Maya's desk. Not even the rich aroma of coffee could pull her from her reverie. Still thinking about the boss's project of a lifetime? Serenity Hills. Maya nodded, her finger tracing the edge of the file folder. Inside were a few faded black and white photos from 40 years ago, a grand, old French colonial-style building amidst a pine forest, with a gleaming brass sign that read Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute. And a few more recent photos, taken by a drone, the same building, but now swallowed by overgrown vegetation, its windows like empty, black sockets staring out at the world. I just find it strange, Maya said softly. Such a large private hospital, with equipment said to be the most modern in the region at the time, why was it shut down and abandoned so suddenly? The file just vaguely states serious medical incident and sealed for quarantine reasons. 40 years have passed, and it's still under quarantine. Ben shrugged, his expression nonchalant. Probably just some scandal they swept under the rug. Back then, there was no social media to expose things. Maybe a medical error killed a bunch of people, the families raised hell, and the investors figured they couldn't salvage the reputation, so they shut it down to keep things quiet. Then time passed, land disputes, paperwork nightmares, and it was forgotten. Happens all the time. His explanation sounded plausible, but Maya wasn't convinced. There was something in the building's silence, in the way it had been left to be consumed by nature, that felt unnatural. It didn't feel like a forgotten structure, it felt more like a sealed tomb. Well, don't overthink it, Ben said, patting her shoulder gently. Just think of it as a trip to Havenwood Peak to get some fresh air. A few days of surveying, taking pictures, measuring things, then we come back and write the report. Easy money, plus we get to enjoy the misty mountains. The boss said we leave next week. I'll book the flights, okay? Maya nodded reluctantly. She tried to push away the creeping sense of unease. Ben was right, she was probably just being overly sensitive. But that night, in her dreams, Maya found herself lost in an endless hallway. The white plaster on the walls was peeling, and the acrid smell of antiseptic mixed with the musty scent of decay filled her nostrils. She heard a child's soft sobbing somewhere nearby, but every time she moved closer, the sound receded. Then she saw a heavy wooden door with a small brass plate engraved with the words "The Morning Light Project." She reached out to open it, but an ice-cold grip seized her wrist. Maya jolted awake, her back drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. Outside the window, the city was sound asleep, but in Maya's mind, the image of the hospital corridor was terrifyingly vivid. The dream felt so real that she could almost still smell the antiseptic in the air. A week later, Maya and Ben stood before the massive, rusted iron gates of the Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute. The once green paint had nearly all peeled away, revealing patches of metal the color of dried blood. A chain as thick as a wrist was wrapped around the gates, secured by a padlock so rusted it was unrecognizable. Behind the gates, the asphalt path leading to the hospital was shattered by weeds and tree roots. The main building loomed behind a thin veil of mist and ancient pine trees, looking like a slumbering beast. The cold, damp air of the Havenwood Peak morning seemed even thicker and heavier here. Wow, a perfect location for a horror movie, Ben whistled, his digital camera at the ready. He seemed excited, treating this like an adventure. As for Maya, she only felt an invisible weight pressing down on her. The unease of the past few days had now morphed into a full-blown premonition of dread. They didn't have a key. The new investor had simply told them to show up and find a way in. It's been abandoned for so long, there's probably nothing left to lose, he had said over the phone with an indifferent voice. With his experience as a field engineer, it only took Ben a few minutes to find a collapsed section of the fence, just big enough for them to squeeze through. The moment they stepped onto the hospital grounds, an almost absolute silence enveloped them. The noise of traffic from the highway suddenly vanished, as if they had just crossed an invisible threshold into another world. All that remained was the sound of the wind whistling through the pines, like a mournful sigh. Weeds grew waist-high, damp with the morning dew. Maya shivered, pulling her jacket tighter. "Let's go, time to get to work." "Let's get some overview shots of the grounds first," Ben said, his voice seeming quieter than usual, as if he too was reluctant to break the terrifying stillness. They circled the main building. The yellow plaster characteristic of French architecture was moldy, stained with long streaks like tear tracks. A few windows on the upper floors were broken, revealing black voids within. A bougainvillea trellis, once carefully tended, had grown wild, its thorny, desiccated branches reaching out and clinging to the wall like skeletal fingers. Maya raised her camera to take a picture, then froze. In a second-floor window, directly above the main entrance, she saw something. A figure? No, it was just a white curtain flapping out of a broken window in the breeze. But for a fleeting moment, Maya could have sworn she saw the faint face of a child behind that curtain. A pale face, with large, black, empty eyes. "Ben," she called softly, her heart racing. "Did you see anything in the second-floor window?" Ben squinted, looking up. "Which window?" "Oh, the one with the curtain." "See what?" "Probably just a bird or something flew by." "Don't scare yourself." Maya tried to believe him. Perhaps it was just a trick of light and shadow. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. They continued toward the left wing of the building, which seemed to be the old administrative area. The main entrance to the hall was locked tight, but a side window had been smashed long ago. Ben used a wooden plank to clear the remaining glass shards from the frame and skillfully climbed inside. "Nothing in here," he called out. "Just rotten papers. Come on in." Maya took a breath, suppressed her fear, and climbed in after him. Inside, the smell of dampness and decaying paper was overwhelming. Faint light from outside illuminated the countless dust motes dancing in the air. The floor was covered in a thick layer of dust, with a few old, faded footprints, but absolutely no new ones besides theirs. They were in a large office. Desks and chairs were in ruins, file cabinets had been pried open, and papers were scattered across the floor, damp and stuck together. It looked as if the place had been ransacked in a hurry. Ben started his work, using a laser measure to get the room's dimensions, while Maya walked around, trying to find any clue about the history of the place. She approached a steel filing cabinet that was still standing in the corner. The cabinet door wasn't locked. Maya hesitated for a moment, then pulled it open. The screech of metal echoed in the silent space. Inside, most of the drawers were empty. But in the bottom drawer, she found a hardbound ledger, deep blue in color, still relatively intact. Maya brushed off the thick layer of dust from the cover, revealing gilded lettering, Serenity Hills Pediatric Institute, patient list, special treatment ward. Maya's heart pounded. She flipped through the yellowed pages. Inside was a list of names, birth dates, admission dates, and diagnoses. All were severe illnesses: leukemia, aplastic anemia, muscular atrophy. She skimmed through the unfamiliar names. Then her eyes landed on the last name on the list. Leo Carter. Diagnosis: congenital immunodeficiency. Admission date: April 15, 1984. The discharge date section was left blank. Instead, There was a handwritten note in red ink, the handwriting shaky, first subject of the morning light project. Failure. Deceased April 29, 1984. A chill ran down Maya's spine. Morning light. That name, she had seen it in her dream. Just then, a loud noise echoed from deep within the building. A heavy thud, as if something very large had just fallen to the floor. What was that? Ben flinched, snapping off his laser measure. The two looked at each other, eyes wide. That sound wasn't like an animal. It had resonance, weight. Probably just the old structure, a piece of the ceiling or a wall collapsed, Ben said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Let me go check it out. Don't. Stay here, Maya quickly stopped him. This place isn't safe. Silence fell again. But this time, it was no longer still. Maya felt as though hundreds of eyes were watching them from the darkness. She listened intently. And then, she heard it. Very faint, but clear. The sound of a wooden toy horse, creaking, somewhere on the floor above. The sound was steady, solitary, and utterly out of place amidst the ruin. Ben heard it too. He stood frozen, his usually rational face now pale, revealing clear bewilderment. He looked at Maya, his eyes asking, "You hear that too, right?" Maya could only nod, her throat dry. The creaking suddenly stopped. In its place came the giggling of a child. The laughter was clear, but it echoed strangely in the large space, making it chillingly ghostly. It didn't come from any specific direction but seemed to be all around them, enveloping them, teasing them. Let's go. Get out of here now. Maya shouted, fear finally breaking through her restraint. Ben didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled toward the window, nearly tripping over each other. As Maya climbed out, she glanced back into the room one last time. For a second, through the dusty window of the opposite corridor, she saw a small white shadow flit by. Very fast, like a faint streak of light. They ran for their lives out of the hospital grounds, not daring to look back. Only when they reached the safety of the highway, amidst the traffic and the noise of life, did they dare to stop, panting heavily. We have to report this, Ben stammered, his face still white as a sheet. Report that. That there's someone living in there. Maybe homeless people. With a small child. Maya shook her head, she knew it wasn't someone living. Ben, do you believe in ghosts? Ben looked at her, not answering. He just raised a hand to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead. His silence was more terrifying than any answer. As they were about to leave, an old woman selling vegetables by the roadside looked at them with a concerned gaze. She had white hair and a wrinkled face, but her eyes were very bright. You two just came from in there? She asked, her gentle, local accent filled with warning. Maya nodded. The old woman sighed and shook her head. That place is not for the living. For 40 years, no one has dared to go near it. They say the little ones are still playing in there. They're just waiting for new people to come and play with them. Don't go back there, you two. That's my honest advice. With that, she turned and ambled away down a small alley. Her words were like a final hammer blow, shattering the doors of reason for Maya and Ben, leaving them with a raw and distinct primal fear. They weren't just surveying an abandoned building. They had trespassed into a haunted domain. And it seemed its residents didn't want them to leave so easily. That evening, back at the hotel, Maya opened the ledger she had unconsciously stuffed into her jacket pocket. She stared at the name Leo Carter and the note about the Morning Light Project. She knew that, whether she wanted to or not, she had to go back. Not for work anymore, but driven by an inexplicable urge, a curiosity mixed with an obsession to find out the truth behind the ghostly echoes at Serenity Hills. Maya's nightmare that night was worse than before. She was no longer an observer but a patient in that very hospital. She lay on a cold iron bed, wearing an oversized patient gown. The corridor outside was no longer empty but filled with children with pale faces and soulless eyes. They shuffled along without a sound, pulling clanking 4 poles. A man in a white lab coat, his face obscured by shadows, entered her room. He held a very large syringe filled with a shimmering silver liquid. "Don't be afraid," his voice was deep and authoritative. "This is the Morning Light Project. It will heal you." Maya wanted to scream, to run, but her body was rigid, unable to move. The cold needle was about to pierce her skin. Maya woke with a start, her heart feeling like it would burst from her chest. The hotel room was quiet, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Ben was asleep in the next room. She sat up and took a sip of water, but the feeling of fear did not subside. That dream was not just a product of her imagination. It was a message, a warning. The next morning, Ben looked visibly exhausted. The dark circles under his eyes showed he had also had a restless night. "What should we do?" Ben asked, his voice hoarse. "I've thought it over. What we heard yesterday. It can be explained. Sound can travel far in an empty, quiet space like that. Maybe there's a family living in the annex building we haven't surveyed yet." The child's laughter, the toy sounds. Could be theirs. Maya looked at Ben. She knew he was trying to cling to the last vestiges of logical explanation. She wanted to believe it too. "Then we go back today," Maya said decisively. "But we'll be better prepared. I want to go into the main treatment area. The place with the Morning Light sign I saw in the file." "Are you crazy?" Ben immediately protested. "After what happened?" "No, we'll just stay outside, survey the rest of the grounds and the annex. Then we go back to the city and report that there are illegal occupants. Mission over." "No, Ben," Maya pleaded. "Aren't you curious? What is the Morning Light Project? Why was the hospital closed so mysteriously? I feel like there's more to it. And what the old vegetable seller said. I have to find out the truth." Finally, faced with Maya's determination, Ben relented, though his heart was filled with anxiety. This time, they didn't go empty-handed. Ben prepared 2 high-powered flashlights, a professional voice recorder, several spare batteries, and even a small coil of rope. "Just in case we get trapped somewhere," he explained. Maya brought the ledger she had found, hoping it would be the key to unlocking the mysteries there. When they returned to the iron gates, the atmosphere seemed even gloomier than the day before. The mist was thicker, almost completely shrouding the building, making it look like a ghost island in a sea of clouds. They squeezed through the collapsed wall again and entered the grounds. The deathly silence was still there, but this time Maya felt it had a different quality. It was no longer an empty stillness, but the silence of a predator holding its breath, waiting for its prey. They decided to enter through the main door. The lock was so rusted that Ben managed to break it with a small iron bar and a bit of force. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a dark and dusty main hall. The light from outside was only enough to illuminate a small area. The reception desk, made of fine wood, was rotten, and a few waiting chairs were overturned. On the wall, a large oil painting depicted a man in a white lab coat, smiling benevolently, surrounded by healthy children. But the man's face in the painting had been slashed with a sharp object, leaving behind a web of gruesome scars. Below the painting was a tarnished brass plate, Director, Professor Alistair Croft. "This must be the genius professor people used to praise," Ben said quietly, shining his flashlight on the vandalized portrait. Maya said nothing, only feeling a cold chill run down her spine as she looked at the slashed eyes in the painting. She had a gut feeling that he was the man from her dream. They turned on their flashlights, the powerful beams cutting through the darkness, revealing two long, deep corridors on either side of the hall. According to an old floor plan Maya had found online, the right corridor led to the regular patient rooms, while the left led to the surgical wing and the special treatment area. "Left," Maya said, her voice firm. Ben hesitated for a second, then nodded. They entered the left corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing dryly. On both sides of the hallway were closed doors. A few room nameplates remained: laboratory, X-ray room. The air grew colder, and the distinct smell of hospital antiseptic grew stronger. Ben turned on the recorder. "Let's record everything," he said. "If there are any strange sounds, we can analyze them later." They reached the end of the corridor, where there was a set of metal double doors. Above it were the words "Special Treatment Ward, authorized personnel only." The doors were unlocked. Maya took a deep breath and, with Ben, pushed the doors open. Inside was a completely different area. Cleaner, less dusty, as if time moved slower here. There was a small waiting room with a few cracked leather armchairs. And there was a single wooden door, identical to the one in Maya's dream. The brass plate on the door was engraved with the words, "Morning Light Project Room." This was it. Maya's heart beat erratically. She reached for the doorknob, feeling the coldness of the metal. "Maya, wait," Ben held her hand back. "I have a bad feeling about this place. We should just look from the outside." But Maya wasn't listening. Some strange, magnetic pull urged her to open this door. She turned the knob. It wasn't locked. As the door opened, a blast of cold air and a strange scent washed over them. It wasn't the smell of antiseptic, nor the smell of mold. It was a sickly sweet smell, like white lilies at a funeral. The room inside was quite large, with a gleaming stainless steel hospital bed in the center that looked almost new. Surrounding it were strange machines Maya had never seen before, with dark screens and a tangle of wires. On the opposite wall was a large blackboard, still covered in chemical formulas and biological diagrams written in white chalk. Maya stepped into the room, feeling as if she were trespassing on sacred ground. Ben followed, constantly scanning the area with his flashlight and recorder. "These machines look so weird," Ben remarked. "They don't look like normal medical equipment." Maya paid no attention to his words. Her eyes were glued to the blackboard. Beneath the complex formulas, one line was circled: final phase, central nervous system regeneration, host, Leo Carter. That name again. Maya shivered. She felt as if the boy's spirit was still lurking somewhere nearby. Suddenly, all their flashlights went out at the same time. Thick darkness enveloped them. "Damn it! What's going on?" Ben cried out, the clicking of his flashlight switch echoing in vain. "I just put new batteries in this morning." "Stay calm, Ben," Maya tried to keep her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. "Don't move." In the absolute darkness and silence, they heard it again. The giggling of a child. This time, it wasn't echoing from a distance, but right beside them. Right in this room. "Who's there?" Ben shouted, his voice cracking with fear. There was no answer. Only the laughter, growing louder, more cheerful, as if delighting in their panic. Then Maya felt a small, cold hand lightly touch her own. She let out a blood-curdling scream and stumbled back, bumping into Ben. Something touched me." Ben waved his hands frantically in the air. "Get out. Go away." Just then, one of the screens on a strange machine in the corner suddenly lit up. Its faint blue glow illuminated a part of the room, enough for them to witness a horrifying sight. Standing just a few feet away was a girl of about 7 or 8, wearing a pristine white dress. Her face was deathly pale, devoid of any color. Her large, round, black eyes were empty and stared straight at them. Her lips were curved into a smile, but it was a soulless, terrifying smile. Ben's jaw dropped, he was frozen to the spot. He had his answer to his skepticism. An undeniable answer. The little girl slowly raised her hand, pointing towards the blackboard. Then she whispered, her voice clear but toneless, like an echo from another world, "Save us. The professor is coming back." After speaking, her figure faded and vanished into the air like a wisp of smoke. The computer screen also went dark, plunging the room back into blackness. The silence returned, heavier and more dreadful than ever. Maya and Ben stood motionless for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Then, the wooden door behind them slammed shut. The slam echoed, followed by the sound of a bolt being slid into place from the outside. They were locked in. "Open the door. Anybody there? Open up." Ben rushed to the door, frantically pounding and yanking the handle. But the thick oak door didn't budge. The sound of the metal bolt locking was as clear and final as a death sentence. They were trapped in the ghostly laboratory, the epicenter of the nightmare. "It's no use, Ben," Maya said, her voice trembling but with a strange calmness. "It wasn't a living person who locked us in." The initial shock gave way to a cold dread and a brutally clear awareness of their situation. They were no longer surveyors, they had become part of the tragic story of this place. Ben dropped his hands from the doorknob, his back sliding down the door until he was sitting on the floor. He panted, his usually confident and rational face now filled with panic and despair. This can't be. It can't be. Ghosts aren't real. He muttered it like a useless mantra. Maya said nothing. She fumbled in the dark, trying to find her backpack. She needed light, even a flicker. Luckily, in the side mesh pocket of Ben's backpack, she found the Zippo lighter he used for smoking. A sharp click rang out, and a small flame flared to life, illuminating the small space around them. The flickering light cast strange, distorted shadows on the walls, making the silent machines look like monsters huddled in the darkness. "We have to find another way out," Maya said, her voice steadier now. She held the small flame towards the walls. The room had no windows. It was designed like a bunker, an isolated laboratory. Ben looked up, the flame dancing in his vacant eyes. "That girl," she said, "save us. And the professor is coming back." Maya nodded. That girl was probably one of the patients who died here. And the professor is definitely Alistair Croft. She looked towards the blackboard, where the ghastly formulas remained. This morning light project. It wasn't for healing. It was something else. They began to search for an escape route. Ben, with his engineer's instincts, tapped on the walls, searching for hollow spots, hoping for a secret passage or a wall thin enough to break. Maya, meanwhile, examined the machines, hoping to find a power source or a switch. As she brought the flame close to a control panel, she saw a small detail that sent a chill down her spine, a keyhole labeled System Ignition. Just then, Ben's recorder, which had been silent since the flashlights died, suddenly emitted a static hiss. Then, a voice came from the small speaker. It wasn't Maya's or Ben's. It was a man's voice, deep, warm, educated, but cold and emotionless. Log entry, April 28, 1984. Subject Carter has shown initial positive reactions to the regeneration serum. Necrotic cells have ceased to multiply. However, an undesirable side effect has appeared: perceptual disturbances, hallucinations, and mild seizures. The dosage must be increased to accelerate the neural regeneration process. It was Professor Croft's voice. It was an old audio log that Ben's recorder had somehow picked up from a source in the room. The voice continued, growing more urgent and obsessive. Log entry, April 29, 1984. Catastrophe. Subject Carter expired after a prolonged seizure. But a strange phenomenon occurred. The EEG still registers weak signals after cardiac arrest. The subject's consciousness doesn't seem to have dissipated. It's trapped. The serum didn't just regenerate cells, it tethered the consciousness to the deceased body. A form of immortality. But an immortality in hell. I have failed. Or have I succeeded? Maya and Ben looked at each other in horror. The truth slowly unveiled itself, more terrible than anything they could have imagined. Croft's therapy didn't heal. It turned children into souls imprisoned in their own dead bodies, an unnatural, painful, and eternal state of existence. The static hissed again, this time another recording, seemingly made in a panic. There were children's screams, the sound of crashing, and Professor Croft's voice, no longer calm but filled with madness. They don't understand. This is a gift. It's eternity. Why are they resisting? The nurses are trying to get them out. Fools. They'll spread the pathogen to the world. No. No one is leaving. My work must be protected. I will seal it all. We will all stay here. Together. Forever. The recording ended with a long, mournful scream, then silence. Now they understood. There was no fire. That was just a story fabricated to cover up a more horrific truth. Professor Croft, in a fit of madness from his failure and wounded pride, had sealed the hospital himself, trapping everyone, the patients, the nurses, and himself, inside, creating a colossal mass grave. "Oh my God," Ben whispered. "Those spirits. They aren't demons. They're victims." Suddenly, they heard footsteps. Heavy, slow footsteps approaching from the corridor outside. The footsteps stopped right in front of their door. The silence that followed for a few seconds felt like an eternity, making their hearts stop. Then, they heard a key turning in the lock. "Get back." Maya pulled Ben to the farthest corner of the room. The lock clicked. The door slowly swung open. Standing in the doorway was not a blurry ghost. It was a distinct figure, a tall man in a yellowed white lab coat. His face was the same one from the slashed portrait in the hall, but it no longer held any benevolence, only a cold, hollow emptiness. His eyes were pitch black, without whites, staring intently at Maya and Ben. It was the spirit of Professor Alistair Croft. "New patients," he said, his voice the same deep baritone from the audio logs. "I can feel the suffering in you. The fear of sickness. The obsession with death. Excellent. You are perfect subjects." He stepped into the room, and the door slammed shut behind him. The invisible pressure from his presence made it almost impossible for Maya and Ben to breathe. "You've arrived at a perfect time," Professor Croft continued, his black eyes sweeping over the machines in the room. "The system has been depleted of energy after all these years. But your life force, your fear, will be an excellent replacement power source. We shall continue the work." Professor Croft's spirit wasn't just haunting the place. He was still continuing his work. And he saw Maya and Ben as the next hosts for his horrific therapy. Ben, in a desperate act, grabbed a metal rod from the floor and threw it straight at Professor Croft. But the rod simply passed through his form and clanged against the wall behind him, having no effect. Professor Croft smiled, a smile utterly devoid of warmth. "Physical force is useless here, young man. Here, only will and fear have weight." He slowly advanced. Maya backed away, her back hitting the control panel of a large machine. In her panic, her hand accidentally hit a red switch marked with a warning symbol. Immediately, a piercing alarm blared through the room. Red lights flashed continuously, bathing the room in a grotesque light.